Hello and welcome to another Pure Theory Crafting for Marvel Avengers Alliance 2. Now, as we can see from the bottom of the screen, PvP Season 5 for Agent 13 just about to finish. Everybody's excited for what's going to happen here in just a little bit. Me, this is how I'm going to pass the time. When the video is over, I'll reload my game and I'll be out there checking out all the new content right alongside you guys. But until then, let's not waste time. Let's find a good way to finish that, and let's respond to a request that I've been given a couple times here. Today, I'm going to go over the Winter Soldier. Now, like Falcon, who I've already done just a couple of videos ago, he is one of the two rewards for Special Operation Number 2, the Civil War. Specifically, if you choose the Iron Man path. The point of this video, not to tell you if he's a good character, a great character, a bad character, a horrible character. It's to help you decide if you want to spend the resources needed to get him. Unlike most characters in the game, he cannot be acquired via the superior power cells, but only by completing that particular path line. And if you are undecided on whether you want to spend one of your Spec Ops keys on unlocking his particular task line, maybe this video will help you make your decision for him or against him. That's the point of this video. So, without further ado, let's go take a look at him. I do have him at level 30. I have been using him, actually. I've not taken him all the way to 3-star. I've been using my AP elsewhere, but he does have several of his tasks completed. Now, in kind of a reverse with Falcon from MAA 1, currently, the more of the complaints I've heard center on his model than Falcon's. MAA 1, everybody hated Sam Wilson's look. Don't use not a great drawing on the face in the 2D sprite there. This is Bucky. Take a look at those stats. It's not quite a 3-star. That's the benchmark I normally use, but the one thing you can already tell, they're fairly balanced. Even getting him to 3-star, none of these are going to jump all the way to 2,000 like we saw with She-Hulk's attack or Falcon's speed. He's a remarkably balanced character, but his speed is atrocious. And even when we get him fully E-ISO'd, his speed stays atrocious. Ironically, this makes him, depending on the build you do with him, this makes him a match for Falcon in terms of his overall speed with the number of moves he gets, but he does it a different way. He has some of the fastest attacks in the game, hands down, and he has multiple at that high speed. The speed of the attack is meant to offset his slow speed as a character, where Falcon had several normal speed moves, but his own speed was, 3 times this number. Falcon got his turns very quickly off of his stat, not off of what the move had. So here we get to see mirror images of how the speed of the character and the speed of the move work in tandem to determine how fast you get your turns. What you can tell, though, looking at these, is his attack and accuracy are obscenely high. The accuracy, always important for any damage-dealing character, but Winter Soldier is one of the best projectile users in the game, and accuracy is even more important for anybody who uses the projectile tag on abilities than it is for other characters, and it's because of how the targeted debuff works. And we'll see that as we get into him. He does have the ability to apply targeted, so I'm going to go over it in detail when we have it there on the screen. But his accuracy is very high, and he doesn't sacrifice attack to get it up there. Bucky builds both attack and accuracy in almost equal measure. Accuracy is better for him because of a way that he multiplies his damage. But it's still, definitely both stats are very, very good. Health and defense and evasion, respectable for a blaster. Blasters are not known for being tough, survival-based characters. Bucky kind of pulls it off a little bit better than I would expect. Thankfully, his task line is not as PvP oriented as Falcon's is. Definitely, still, I've seen him used in PvP more than once. I don't know that he's the greatest. I think if you're going to bring a blaster, there are some other ones right now who really fit the PvP meta. But in PvE and in PvP, if you're interested in doing it, he definitely works, and he can end up doing great damage once you've got him set up and rolling. The big thing with him, getting the ball rolling. We saw what I did with Falcon. We saw what I did with some of the other characters. She-Hulk was a very bad example because I showed her tanking just to show that I could do it, just to show that she could do it, and that she wasn't completely useless. But I didn't really demonstrate how a character begins to build momentum the further they get into combat. And Winter Soldier almost defines that. Momentum is a trait of his. Now, his bonus, 10% to health, that's survival for the team. It is, it's just survival for the team. 10% health, I will never turn down. And 10% accuracy, because accuracy is big for him. And we'll see that as we get into the next screen. His passive, Prey. If no enemy is being hunted, single target attacks apply the hunted debuff, increasing Winter Soldier's damage against that target by 25%. Counter attacks, free attacks. All forms of free attacks do not apply hunted. The coordinated EISO set, which I put on him because I wanted to see this specifically, coordinated does not apply hunted. Single target manually selected attacks will apply the hunted debuff. Now, the hunted debuff is a tactical debuff with no duration. Or rather, more specifically, an unlimited duration. Once it is on that target, it stays on that target until they do something to remove tactical debuffs. Either repositioned or, it's not cleanse. Whichever one actually cleanses all forms of debuffs. It is a tactical debuff. It can be prevented and removed. But it's a debuff unique to Winter Soldier. He is the only one who gets the 25% damage increase from it. However, let's look back at the last couple videos. The very last one I did, She-Hulk has 2 or 3 moves that take advantage of tactical debuffs. Even if they do not gain the damage bonus, Hunted is a tactical debuff for all characters who exploit tactical debuffs in order to increase their damage. For resources, ammunition and stamina. Stamina, common as always. Everybody knows that one. 40 regen per round. Nothing truly special there. He does require stamina for his moves that use ammunition, but generally speaking, they only require 25 stamina, which means that you might as well just not be using much of any at all. The only reason, to my knowledge, that they would require 25 stamina instead of just being stamina free is because he has some other moves that use 70 or 80 stamina, and this prevents you from using that move multiple times in a row just by sneaking in one ammunition ability. The 25 stamina basically reduces your regeneration for the turn to 15. So if you use a move with 80 stamina and then you start firing multiple shots, it's going to slow your overall stamina regen so that you can't use that move with 80 stamina over and over and over again. And we'll see that when we get into the abilities. Ammunition is an oddball resource. Okay, you've got things like combo points. You've got your rage bar. You have all kinds of resources in the game, but ammunition is one where it only comes in 5 points and doesn't necessarily use up all of them whenever it's used. Instead, it starts exactly in the center. You will start combat with 3 ammunition, which is kind of an important number. We'll see that as we go further in here. You started with 3. Most abilities that require ammunition just use 1. You can fire off 3. Now, like all characters that use ammunition, his tactical is what you will use to replenish it. And like most characters that use ammunition or power, his tactical is a slow maneuver. It doesn't go very fast. Therefore, you want to make the best use of stamina and ammunition together that you can to limit the number of times in a combat that you need to reload. If you're playing him in PvE, and that's where I really feel that he's great in PvE, I feel he's great in a specific portion of PvE content, and we'll get to that towards the end of the video. But if you're going to use him in PvE, if one enemy is left alive on the screen and he's got the ability to kill it, it may be better off for you to go ahead and have him reload as his last action for the wave. Even if he still has 3 or so ammo left, have him reload anyway. Let somebody else do that finishing shot, and he can start the next wave without that massive turn penalty with all 5 ammunition already there. And the reason I stress this so much for him, his speed is horrendous. A slow speed move on Winter Soldier is the equivalent of very slow on other characters. His reload animation, the turn icon at the top of the screen, puts him like all the way over here. It does not put him somewhere in this range. No. He's all the way over by where the 30 is on the screen. He is not the fastest when it comes to recovering his ammunition. Let's take a look at some of his abilities. He has an interesting mix. He is, in the way that I have him set, a very strong single-target projectile user. And that is simply one build that you can take for him. I believe that despite the fact that he has 3 area of effect attacks, his strongest purpose is single-target damage, and it's because of that unique hunted debuff. That mechanic that only he has right now. Down the line, maybe we'll see some other characters. I would love to see X-23 in here. I know she's not going to make a reappearance because she's a mutant, but I would love to have seen her because in MAA 1 she had that lovely Berserker Craze thing. I'd love to see her and Winter Soldier in tandem, but maybe that's just me. Taking a look at those abilities, let's start at the very start of it. He's got 3 melee abilities over the course of his moves. Do I suggest him as a melee unarmed build? No. No, I don't. But every one of these moves has an unusual trait to it. Okay, first off, if you're going to use these at all, try to get clobbered on the enemy. Try very hard to get clobbered on the enemy because he's so slow that a normal speed move is bad for him. And none of those moves get faster. They're not fast. You'll notice that looking down at the 2, 3, and 4 star, the damage goes up. On any other character, and I said this in the She-Hulk video, anything above 160 damage on a final damage on a normal speed move, I consider acceptable. But Winter Soldier is so slow that I treat all of his moves as one speed category slower. Unless you're deliberately E-ISOing him 4 speed to make up for that lack, this is not the same thing. Normal speed on him is not the same thing as those normal speed moves on Falcon was. It's just not going to happen. However, he hits pretty hard. His attack is very high, his accuracy is very high, and he lands a string of criticals and devastates like nobody else does. It is unreal with him. Even Hawkeye doesn't do that. Now, Hawkeye can't miss and can't glance, but he doesn't land the solid strings of devastate that Winter Soldier can once you get him rolling. And part of that is moves like this that grant confident damage and accuracy by 40%. Mental buff, that mental buff is important. This move is designed to be woven in between his shots in order to make better use of his ammunition. Now take a look up there. It's 70 stamina. We've already seen that's not going down. But armor piercing allows him to... Armor piercing on a blaster allows him to target bruisers, specifically bruisers because they tend to be the highest defense characters, for immense amounts of damage, while at the same time, because its target is one enemy, he's going to apply that hunted debuff and gain further damage on every attack against that target until it dies. So this move is a setup for his offensive moves. And it definitely does have its uses. If your team has the ability to apply Clobbered, this move becomes perfectly feasible to weave back and forth. The extra speed from Clobbered makes up for his slow speed as a character, and this is still a decently damaging normal speed attack. Totally works. Works as fine as far as I'm concerned. Burst Fire is a beautiful move. There is no other way to describe this. It is immensely damaging once he's got the ball rolling. Damage rating 123 is not high, but it goes up to 193 and is extremely fast. How often do you see the extremely fast speed? Not often. Not often. Pay attention as we go through these, because Winter Soldier has like 4. This is where he makes up for his slow speed as a hero by having some of the fastest base speed moves in the game, while still doing an extremely solid amount of damage. Now, this particular attack fires 3 bullets, so the damage you see on each bullet won't appear to be as high. It is projectile, and projectile matters, because the very next move we see will apply targeted, and we'll go over why that works together. 50% damage if the attacker has a mental buff. We just went over confident. But we also, way back in that horrific Nebula video that still haunts my nightmares, we have seen what happens if you mix sharpshooting with clever maneuver. Sharpshooting is a mental buff. Clever maneuver is going to add a further 50%. You are doubling the damage of this move the moment sharpshooter is applied to Winter Soldier, and he has the ability to give that to himself. The difference between sharpshooting and confident is that accuracy increase, but we're going to see that Winter Soldier's accuracy gets so high, and this move has precise, so it's already 25% higher than it should be. His accuracy gets so high that the accuracy bonus from confident does very little for him. In most normal fights, this move, once he's got, like, even just sharpshooting on him, like, once he's targeting an enemy he's already hit with either targeted or with hunted, once either of those is on the enemy, typically, if 2 out of 3 shots for this move are gonna devastate, probably all 3. And that's where his damage really begins to build on itself. That high accuracy, mixed with the clever maneuver, mixed with multiple mental buffs that he can give to himself and debuffs he can put on the enemy. Winter Soldier is not an eggs in one basket type of character. His attacks can increase their own accuracy. They can apply debuffs that make him do better with hunted and with targeted. And he can apply buffs to himself, and then once all those are on there, exploit them all. And when we get to the builds, we'll double back and take a look at this. Precise exploits the targeted debuff in a specific way. Clever maneuver exploits those mental buffs he gives on himself with the damage. So as he's buffing himself, as he and the team are debuffing the enemies, his damage continues to compound. An enemy who I hit with this attack for about 500 per individual bullet survived that round, but had targeted, now had hunted. I got a mental buff on him. The next round that I fired off with this, the damage was something along the lines of 1,500 per individual bullet on an extremely fast move. 4,500 damage from this move. And that is like Spec Ops 1, the epic boss path. It does go slightly lower in heroic. Enemies tend to have higher health, higher damage. And usually if I'm in a heroic, I'm going on an epic boss path where everything is a 4-star difficulty rating anyway. This move can build up to immense amounts of damage. Let's not go back, spend too much more time on that. We're going to touch it all on that with builds towards the end of it. Down the line, this is a move that pairs well with it. Damage rating, not nearly as high. But it's an area attack. It is going to hit everybody, and it is going to be, again, extremely fast projectile. 1 ammo, 25 stamina. There's that 25 stamina again. We already saw 170 stamina move. That 25 stamina serves a purpose, and that is to slow your stamina regen so that every now and then you still need to stop and reload even if you haven't used up all your ammunition. It's a little trickier to weave those moves back to back, when you're only getting the equivalent of 15 stamina back for the turn. Because of the 40 you got back, you just spend another 25 of it. This move applies targeted with an 80% chance. It does that starting at rank 1. This is currently star level 2. Its damage goes up. Nothing, no, there's no resource cost or anything. Its damage goes up. That's it. But here, let's go on to the targeted debuff. This is very important for all projectile users, not just Winter Soldier, understanding how targeted works and why accuracy is so important to a projectile user. Part of the reason I'm going over this, Agent 13 is being released before I finish recording this video, and she's a projectile user. There's others in the mix. There's not a ton. Most of them are blasters, but there are projectile users in the mix. We've already seen that with Falcon. Age of Ultron Black Widow is a fantastic teammate for Winter Soldier. And both Hawkeyes use projectiles. They exist. They're around. War Machine, also projectile user with certain attacks, I believe. Tactical debuff. Projectile attacks against this target gain 25% accuracy and deal an additional 25% damage on a crit. That is not a fixed 25% damage increase. You have to get a crit or higher, and this is why accuracy is important. The more accuracy you have, the more you can stack it on this. Now, this is why I said his burst fire exploits targeting, because its precise maneuver gives him that 25% accuracy already, plus another 25% accuracy from targeted. And as we'll see a little bit further into the video here, another 25% accuracy if they're hunted. A 75% accuracy increase, even more if you have Confident. Winter Soldier is where Falcon stacks speed to the point that I don't think I've seen a faster character. Winter Soldier stacks accuracy to the point that I don't think I've ever seen a more accurate character. And for a projectile user, that translates directly into increased damage once targeted is on the enemy. Just as if you had hit them with Clobbered and they get the 25% damage increase from that, you're going to see that same damage increase on here while increasing the chance of crits and devastates. Screw the class bonus. This is a guy who can still tag Wasp. He can. He tags her just fine. Double Slash. This one I don't have. This is the only one-star move that I don't have. I only have half his moves anyway. But, so we're going to look at this from a theory crafting point of view. Bleeding and at 2-star susceptible. I like that. There are not enough bleeding-based characters who can also apply susceptible. And I don't know that there are necessarily any, except maybe Gamora, because I'm not terribly familiar with her, who can apply bleeding and susceptible side by side. Now, in the Black Panther video, I discussed how susceptible interacts weirdly with bleeding because bleeding stacks up to 3. Applying the two of them simultaneously gets rid of that. Susceptible is normally only a benefit if the target already has 3 stacks of bleeding on them. Anything less than that, and you're better off simply stacking another level of bleed. Putting susceptible and bleeding together makes this better. Now, this is a normal speed move. This one's stamina cost starts at 80, but does drop down to 60. 60 is wonderful. You can use it 3 times without running out of stamina. And of course, if he chooses to mix in one of those 25-point shots, he can recover essentially a quarter of the cost of this every turn that he fires out a bullet in between these. So Double Slash is great if your team already has the ability to do melee and bleeds. It makes for a good stamina using option if you're trying to find an attack that isn't going to use up your ammunition. There's only going to be one more move, and it's the first of his 2 stars that I'll go over, that uses purely stamina. Everything else is going to use ammunition. So taking one of these 3, if you're not in a good position to reload, if you're trying to sneak in another attack, or even if you're just trying to set up the team, one of these moves should probably be included at your discretion in order to make full use of the fact that he has a rapidly regenerating stamina bar. Let's go over that 2-star move. This is the last of his non-projectile, or rather, non-ranged attacks. Melee, unarmed, speed normal. Doesn't get any faster. All of his melee speed are normal attacks, and again, his base speed, very slow. He is not a fast character. 60 stamina does not go down. But 60 stamina, again, we just went over it. This means that typically you can weave this into his shots pretty easily. Now, sharpshooting is a wonderful buff for him. We've already gone over how his highest single target projectile attack really benefits from sharpshooting by stacking that 40% with a mental buff. Why does it have blocking? That made me stop and think about him. It really did. Why blocking when it's removed immediately after you attack again? Now, I did not find Winter Soldier to be a great candidate for the coordinated ISO set. I put it on him immediately and tested it because I wanted to see if coordinated would apply hunted, and it does not. Instead, it's a powerful ranged attack that it's a meh powerful ranged projectile attack. No debuffs, no nothing special about it. It does benefit from sharpshooting. It will immediately remove blocking. The biggest benefit to this, I think, is to look at who he was paired with when he was released. Not Falcon, they were exclusive choices. Instead, Civil War Iron Man. Civil War Iron Man specializes and is a wonderful center point of a team that has no dedicated tank. High defense, lots of shields, group-wide shields. This can be used. It can be used in between your. It can be used in between your shots to bring up sharpshooting, and if you are shielded, blocking is going to double the strength of one of Iron Man's improved shields. And it gives you the time to do a reload, a long reload. And if the enemy does happen to attack Winter Soldier in the middle of that, as long as the shield holds, he does not lose sharpshooting. Civil War Iron Man, Winter Soldier, and another character of your choice can work very well together. If you want a really funny combination there, throw in Civil War Cap in the middle of it, and allow Civil War Cap to cover Winter Soldier to reduce the damage he takes even further. And see if you can't keep sharpshooting up all the time just because of the shields and the covered and everything else, that nothing actually damages Winter Soldier. They got to make it through the shields first. That's how I see this particular move being used. It's meant to buy you time to do your reload without losing sharpshooting. If you're running with a dedicated tank, feel free to bring this move as your third slot like I did. Ignore the blocking mechanic. It is a little more specific than what you might normally use it for. Use it as a filler move to apply sharpshooting and thereby increases damage for the rest of the fight. If you're going to use him in a non-conventional team, and I love me some non-conventional teams, look into blocking and where he can use it tactically to buy himself time before his next move. Now here's the trick. Removed after attacking. We're going to see another move down the line here that is a debuff. And because it's a debuff, it lacks this word right up here. It doesn't have the attack tag, which means, like other things like offensive tacticals, like tactical abilities like Black Panthers that apply a debuff to the enemy line, it is not an attack. And it therefore does not remove blocking. He can put this up and then spam that move across the enemy line without losing this buff. We'll get to that here in a second. Again, something we'll look at as we get towards builds. That move right here, Delayed Blast. Extremely fast, 25 stamina, 1 ammo. Like all of his shots, this is a quick move. And it does burn through some of that stamina regen. Debuff, not an attack. No damage rating. Starts at a 2-turn cooldown. It's the cooldown that drops. If you want to use this move, use it at 4-star. Get that cooldown to 0. Do his little punch for sharpshooting. Throw up blocking so that you can take less damage as you apply this to the team. The very next move in the line will show you why we're doing that. Volatile and Time Bomb. 2 separate explosive moves. One's a physical debuff, one's a tactical debuff. Removing one won't remove the other unless it is a remove all debuff ability, like Iron Fist. This move ignores evasion. I can't stress that enough. It is a debuff. Debuffs are not attacks. All the reactions that you think of when you hear attack do not apply to debuff moves. Counters and preemptive counters like Iron Fist or Heimdall's. I can't remember the buff because I don't have Heimdall. Those preemptive counters and such only work with attacks. As a heavy Moon Knight user, I make use of Moon Knight's debuff protection move, where it puts Intimidated on the enemy and Protect on himself. It's a debuff move, not an attack. It doesn't trigger any form of a counter when I use it. This is the same thing. He can chuck his grenades among the enemy line without triggering any form of a counterattack on anybody until he's ready to set them off. He can do this without losing the blocking buff that's causing him to survive long enough to do this setup. And the fact that this is extremely fast means that he can, for 1 ammo, toss it along the entire enemy line. Now, Time Bomb is funny. Time Bomb has to last for its long duration before it blows up. When it does, it hurts. But I believe that Time Bomb is I believe that Time Bomb counts as a blast attack. I believe that the actual damage from Time Bomb has the blast tag, meaning that I believe when it goes off, if anybody else is still tagged with Volatile and Volatile hasn't worn off, which is important because this will go off after this already disappears. If you've triggered Volatile on one person, but you have Volatile set up on somebody else and Time Bomb goes off and detonates, it should set off Volatile on any of the other opponents who you haven't triggered it on yet. Setting Time Bombs along the entire enemy line means that even if you die before you can set off Volatile, if your other heroes can last long enough, ultimately Time Bomb will blow them up. It will hurt, because it damages the entire team. This is the move that goes with it. HE round, high explosive round, for those who are not familiar with military terminology. Cost 3 ammo. And 25 stamina, because again, always 25 stamina, just to limit that stamina regen. Damage rating is a 45, it doesn't really get much higher. 3 and 4 star, again, just a damage rating increase. Extremely fast ranged blast. This is not a projectile. Does not benefit from targeted. Does benefit from sharpshooting, although its damage is so low, that part is somewhat irrelevant. But keep in mind this. Wounding Strike is an additional 200% damage over time. If you're firing this with Sharpshooter, I believe that the final damage, as calculated with Sharpshooting, does in fact impact the amount of damage increase from Wounding Strike. He also has the ability to apply Bleed and Susceptible. This is a damaging debuff. Susceptible works on this. It does. I don't know that I would build towards that, but it's a combination that you can do. If you're already building towards using his bleeding and susceptible, you can basically tag this in there to make better use of susceptible. I know that I've seen at least one person talk to me about running, especially with Drax, a bleeding and wounding team, running them side by side on targets with susceptible to take off the biggest amount of dot damage that they can. And Winter Soldier has some ability to add to that. Not a great ability, but he can. Area Attack. This is one of 3. That range blast, extremely fast. This can be used to set off all those Volatile and Time Bombs. The one thing I will point out is that 3 ammunition cost. If you start off by putting Volatile onto anyone, you will need to reload before you can set this off, and that reload is slow enough that you might risk losing an application of Volatile in order to do it. But if Volatile is set up by the team, or if you've found a way to do the reload, or if you just practice the timing better than anything that I've done with him, his speed will get higher at 3 and 4 star. It will. But this can be used to set off that chain of explosives along the entire enemy line. And because Blast sets off Volatile as soon as you fire it, regardless of whether or not the attack is dodged, I believe, much like Shield Breaker removes a shield before it determines the amount of damage dealt, I believe that this can be used against high evasion characters to apply Volatile with no chance of a miss, because it's a debuff, not an attack, and then follow up with this, which will set off the volatile before it determines if the attack even lands. So that is one potential build combination I've looked at. This, his 3-star ability, if I can get it to come up. There we go. Okay, Guns Blazing. I've had the chance to test this move, not on my own, but because an ally was running this for a little bit. This move hits pretty hard for an area of attack. And it's a clever maneuver. It is ranged. It does gain that like 90% damage increase from sharpshooting and should be used with it. Because a 90% damage increase on this will make this a wave clearing move. It hits several people simultaneously like a truck. This move is Range Blast. It can be used, in addition to being Projectile, it benefits from targeted, and it can be used to set off Volatile. As if targeting didn't make it enough of a damage increase, let's give it the ability to set off Volatile at the same time. Its biggest drawback is that 5 ammunition cost. You have to reload to use this move, and you'll have to reload before you can use it again. So, throw Volatile, punch somebody to get blocking, put Volatile and Time Bomb across the enemy line, reload because you've still got blocking, and then fire off Guns Blazing and watch the entire enemy line die. Used in PvP, that's a combination that I would look at. In fact, it's a combination that I almost want to try. But again, I would get Winter Soldier to 4-star before you really focus on him as a PvP character, because you've got to make up for that slow speed somehow. And you're really going to need everything you can eke out of it. Still, it's a potential build, and it's one of the ones that I'll throw in as we get to it here, after I go over our EISO slots. 2 evasion slots, and a health slot, and 2 health slots. Defense. 2 evasion, 2 defense, 1 health. He is remarkably tough for a blaster. Solid defense. His health already starts higher than his defense and evasion, but with 2 EISO slots each, his defense and evasion will pass his health. Again, not terribly squishy. Now, his accuracy, we've already seen all the ways that he can increase his accuracy. And once again, I realized I forgot the tactical, I forgot the innate. We'll take a look at those in a sec. We'll use those because we're going back there to go over builds anyway. His accuracy, he stacks it on his own. 1 EISO for accuracy, more than good enough. I like the fact that instead, he EISOs his attack because that's what he will neglect between those offensive stats. Do take note that as low as his speed is, he gets no speed EISOs. If you are paying attention to your secondary stats, try to get accuracy on at least maybe 3 of them that are not this yellow one here, 3 of the others. Beyond that, he's going to build his own accuracy. He'll be fine. He's either going to build his own accuracy or he's going to use a debuff move and like blast moves that are going to rely on volatile and don't care about accuracy anyway. So try to get accuracy on at least 3. Try to get speed on every one of them. Like literally all 8. The more speed that you can pile onto him, the more effective he's going to be because it's his biggest weakness. More so than anything else. Now, set bonuses. Coordinated, if you're running him full projectile, if you're aiming for sharpshooting and you're aiming for targeted, coordinated's not bad. But you need a team that can make use of that. You need to be running a projectile team, and right now, there's not a good enough true mix of characters to run that. There's not really anybody who can fill the tank role effectively and still add to projectile. 2 of the better projectile users that I've seen are support tacticians. 4 of the others are blaster, and 1 is a scrapper. I would like to see more projectile users down the line. I would love to see Punisher get added to the game soon. Not because I like him as a character, because honestly, I don't care about him one way or another there, but because I imagine him to be a very good projectile user. So coordinated, good with projectile. Not so good if you're going to follow some of the other lines. If you go that build that I was talking about applying volatile and then setting it off with either high explosive round or Guns Blazing, you're going to run into a problem there, in that his coordinated will take off that blocking buff that you're using to keep him alive and to have him take minimal damage. So if you're going to run a no-tank team use him in PvP. Any of those others where you're really going to take advantage of that blocking buff, I would avoid coordinated entirely. Focus on giving him defensive stats instead. He just isn't very fast, and that means that when you're going through that setup round or two that he needs, you really want him to survive. Now, he has several offensive debuffs that make him like that are central to the different builds that he has. For those debuffs to work, they're all at 80%. He is an amazing candidate for the experimental EISO set. When I was testing him out, I put it on there. Even if the crystals are only 3-star instead of 5, put him on there. Winter Soldier needs experimental to reach his potential. More so than Falcon did. Falcon only had 4 debuffs, and 2 of them were the same thing. They were wide open, either given by himself or by Red Wing. But he could kind of get around it even without that. Instead, he would give himself buffs with 100% and call it good. Winter Soldier's debuffs are part of his a way of avoiding that eggs in one basket. Where Falcon is all about the buffs that he gives himself, Winter Soldier splits between buff and debuff, and if you aren't landing those debuffs on the enemy line, Winter Soldier's going to have problems. So give him experimental, call it good there. His health is okay, his defense is okay, and with blocking, give him impenetrable. I don't know if they stack on themselves. I believe that they do. But go ahead and give him the impenetrable set. Give him rejuvenating. Give him that shield at 50% health. Give him whatever one of the defensive stats you want. He can make use of them. And he can make use of them pretty well. Coordinated, if you're going to use it, that's great. It fills up 6 of your slots. Don't neglect the experimental EISO. Keep that in mind if you're going to run him with coordinated. You only have room for one more set. And that experimental EISO set is really, really useful on him. Losing some of the shots that come from losing some of the debuffs from the experimental EISO set to me will be a much, much bigger damage loss than you would get from the free attacks from coordinated. Because by themselves, they don't do a lot of damage. They need those debuffs, like hunted and targeted, on the enemy to actually measure up to the damage of what you're going to get just with the experimental set. So that's my thought on the sets for him. Give him defensive sets, give him experimental, save coordinated until you've already given him experimental, but know that if you give him that, you're not giving him anything defensive oriented at all. Let's take a look at the tactical innate, and then let's talk a few builds. I've already looked over at my phone. I do play this on two different systems. I hear that metal ding in the background. It means it started to rain here, and it's hitting a little tin pot in the roof. A tin covering of some type. Ignore that if you can. I'm sure the microphone's picking it up. Let's take a look at the tactical. It is exactly what I said. It is a slow speed ammo generator. There is no other ability to this. Unlike a lot of characters who generate power with their tactical, he is not gaining a buff. He's not inspiring himself. He's not giving himself any kind of buff. The goal is to use this as little as possible, because aside from regenerating 40 stamina instead of just 15 for the turn, there is no real benefit to this other than giving you back 5 ammo. So use this as little as possible. It is still his only way of regenerating ammo. Alright, determined. This significantly increases the overall utility of that hunted debuff. He ignores stealthy and protected and gains 25% accuracy when attacking his hunted target. Hunted by default is a 25% damage increase, and that's it. This gives it both seeking and flanking and 25% more accuracy. Even if they go into stealth afterwards or are protected afterwards, and that was a thunder blast. Lovely. Anyway, if you're going to use this, this is why I completely ignored the alerted and the is it implacable set? Something like that. Whichever set allows you to go past, whichever set gives you flanking on everything. He doesn't truly need those. He is very good at burning down tanks because most of them are bruisers. And Wasp, who's your best tactician tank, he's one of the few who has an accuracy high enough to hit her consistently. We've already seen that his accuracy is his highest stat, and you can still build it up through his ISOs. But between the ability to add confident to himself, and the fact that between targeted, 25% accuracy increase, hunted, 25% accuracy with this, and the precise shot on his burst fire for 25% more accuracy, he can reach a level of accuracy that matches Wasp's evasion. He can increase his accuracy by 75%. And he can actually hit Wasp consistently. The fact that he has a debuff option that can apply Time Bomb or Volatile, and Wasp's abysmally low health, means that he has more than one way to kill her. And all other tanks, he's capable of hurting them. He's capable of burning them down. So do not be worried if your hunted target is the enemy tank. He is a fantastic tank killer. This also means that when you're using him in PvE, which is where I would use him more, his ability to stack his accuracy makes him like the basic Hawkeye, who can't miss and can't graze, who can only land hits or above. He is great against content higher level than himself. He will do crits and devastates against 3 and 4 star enemies, even if he himself is only 2-star. One of the biggest restraints on your ability to kill higher level enemies is landing shots, because every time you glance, you have a reduced chance of applying those lovely debuffs. Winter Soldier doesn't suffer from that. Instead, he gets better in long battles. Battles where a wave takes more than a single round to clear. Battles where he can really show off that accuracy that stacks much higher than other people. He's got a wave clearing move, but when I look at his use, how I've actually tested him, how I've practiced him, there are other characters who I would bring, especially those without a resource cost, who can spam slightly lower damage area of effect against lower level enemies. I would never bring Winter Soldier on a scouting mission. I would bring your basic default Hawkeye with multi-shot, or bring Thor with his various Call Thunders based on which version of Thor you bring. I would bring Electro with his Chain Lightning ability. Bring characters like that to burn through waves of low-level enemies very fast. Do not bring Winter Soldier. He has 3 AoEs. They are, with the exception of his third one that requires 5 ammunition, every one of them is some kind of a move that's meant to complement another and not meant to be a killing move by itself. And that third one requires him to reload every time you use it. In fact, it requires him to reload before you can even use it once. So I would not bring Winter Soldier as a low-level wave clear. I would bring him as a stupidly high single-target damage against in-game enemies, or if you're going to use him in PvP, use him with that lovely debuff combination so that he can act as a counter to either high defense individuals or high evasion individuals, because he can do both. So let's look at builds. The build I have here, this is a fairly straightforward one, very easy to build up, very easy to use. It takes a single 2-star ability and 2 of his 1-stars. These you're going to get out of red canisters. These, many of you who have already unlocked them, will already have out of your red canisters. And this one I got out of a superior power cell. I believe it's also a reward for one of the end chapter fights. Again, we are making use of Burst Fire as your core damage dealing move. I have seen this get up to 15 to 18,000 for each of the 3 bullets it fires against the enemies in the Spec Ops 1 Chapter 3 Epic path, the Epic Yellow Jacket path. this move burns through even those heavy Hydra armors very quickly. This is my setup move. I use this to apply targeted to the enemy line. It is the first action I do for a wave. The last action I do for a wave is usually to try to reload, so I can start the wave with down the line and then just start picking off enemies. The accuracy bonus and the damage bonus from targeted make it enough that if he can't get hunted up because the enemies die too fast, oh well, the enemies are dying too fast, not that big of a deal. Once the target is on the enemy line, I just start burst firing, starting at one side, working my way down to the other, and he kills them with a quickness. Winter's Fury, this is often an opening setup. It is a mixed bag for me. I have some thoughts about it and some not, and it really depends on whether or not I can kill those blasters and bruisers who have the area of effect attacks fast enough to keep them from knocking sharpshooting off of him. Because with the normal speed, if Clobbered is not on the enemy, this takes a little while. If he still has 3 or so bullets left at the end of a round, my last action will often be to throw this instead of reloading, to try to make sure I start the next round with sharpshooting off before I even start firing with down the line. Again, very simple, easy to move, easy to use setup. Winter's Fury, great with people who can throw shields on you, and builds up the damage of burst fire through clever maneuver. That precise from there compounds onto targeted, onto his hunted buff, to result in a very massive increase to his accuracy, so that every shot is a devastate, and 25% more damage on every one of those devastates. He will build up his damage very quickly once you do this, and you'll find that once sharpshooting is up, it's frequent that the next wave, and some of those fights have up to 5 waves, he opens the round by targeting, it is extremely fast, he then just starts burst firing until he's out of ammunition and reloads. By the time that he's reloading, the wave is typically dead and he's moving on to the next, and most of your other heroes will have only had maybe 1 turn, maybe 2. So that's one build that I'm using right now. There is another potential build in the use of Delayed Blast, and then a detonator of your choice. There are 2 of them. This one is a little easier to use because it is 3 ammo. So if you reload, you can fire off 2 detonators and then an HE Blast to use up his 5 ammunition. If you want to fire off all 3 of these right from the start without reloading, then as soon as you reload, you're able to use Guns Blazing for a massive amount of damage to the enemy line, but you're counting on him to have survived that long. Don't get me wrong, once he starts the chain of firing these are all extremely fast. They will be applied very quickly. Again, this is a good combination wherein you want to use Winter's Fury, but you're not using it for sharpshooting. Sharpshooting only is going to help that final Guns Blazing move. You're going to use it for blocking, to keep him alive long enough to apply Delayed Blast to the enemy line. Stamina, not an issue with this kind of a build. Even all the way up to this, still just 25 stamina for those. As long as you're not using Winter's Fury consistently, you're not going to run out of stamina. So when looking at the 3 unarmed abilities here, I would pick one of them, but not more than that, because all of his ammunition abilities use enough stamina that they're really going to limit your stamina regeneration. First Strike, that ability there, if you have somebody else in the party who can apply sharpshooting, if you're running him with Age of Ultron Black Widow, and I've done this, in fact, she's a core member of my team typically, you can actually get rid of Down the Line for the targeted application, because she's going to apply that and sharpshooting. That replaces both of the offensive buffs from these moves in a single shot. The fact that she can put sharpshooting on him and target on the enemies allows him to start with burst fire. Because half the time, even with her delayed first turn, half the time she's going before he does. Instead, go ahead and mix in the occasional first strike. Get that confident buff, because it's one that's not mimicked by the other 2. And your burst fire will just hit that much harder. If you're going to do that, feel free to take advantage of some of these other moves. Either make use of the Wounding Strike. It's not a bad combination to carry Guns Blazing with. So that if you start the next wave, you can do a first strike or if you have confident up, you can do guns blazing just to do that ridiculously powerful opening shot. And if anything survives that, you can reload and then just start doing his burst fire over and over. This move, just like burst fire, it's getting a 90% damage bonus if you have sharpshooting. If she can apply sharpshooting and he doesn't have to do that slow punch, guns blazing hurts like a truck. But I would still use this as a great all-purpose self-buffing and self-debuffing in PvE build. This particular combination works very well no matter who your team is, because he's applying sharpshooting to himself, which is he's the only one who cares about it, and he's applying targeted to the entire enemy line with a single action, which means even when that first enemy dies, he can switch to the next without losing anything. So if you're not running a buffing based team, he can be a very high damage single target blaster without needing a lot of heavy team support. If you need a blaster on your team and you're still working out your overall synergy, if you're still investing, then Winter Soldier is fully capable, like Falcon, of doing synergy with his own buffs. Unlike Falcon's adroit, Winter Soldier actually uses buffs that can be applied by multiple other people. Other people will apply sharpshooting, other people can apply targeted. He can make use of those and can fit in very well with those. He works great alongside Hawkeye if you need two blasters. Why you would, I don't know. But I view him in a lot of ways that when it comes to, and these we'll consider this the final thoughts portion. When looking at Winter Soldier, he is high-end Hawkeye. Not Age of Ultron Hawkeye with all of his free attacks and the stealthy abilities and stuff like that. No. Your basic default Hawkeye. And I have a real fondness for that Marvel Now Hawkeye that everybody gets right at the start, because when it comes to free-to-play games like this, where you have the premium purchases and they're trying to get you to buy the other characters, they have given you a strong starting blaster who is truly viable all the way up to end game, and is in fact one of if not the very best end game sweepers. I intend to do a pure theory crafting for Marvel Now Hawkeye because everybody has him, and there's a period in time where everybody has to use him. So I want people who are often sick of him at low level and want to replace him because they're given him by default and therefore they don't want him. He's not rare, he's not cool, he's not specialized like some other heroes are. I want people to see how much potential he's got. But one of the greatest purposes of Marvel Now Hawkeye is his ability to rapidly and consistently clear low-level enemy waves. If you are trying to farm a low-level boss on normal or hard, if you are doing your scouting missions, especially silver scouting missions on Saturdays, when people are doing those scouting missions over and over and over and over, Marvel Now Hawkeye shines, and he's beautiful at it. Winter Soldier, not the case. But like Hawkeye, he has that high accuracy that allows him, that he can build even higher on himself, that allows him to take on powerful enemies, 3 and 4 star heroic or high-end spec ops enemies. With Chapter 4 potentially being released even as I finish this video, Winter Soldier will be a great frontliner when you're trying to advance through difficult new content. He may be forbidden in Spec Ops 2, which is some of the hardest content currently in the game, as I'm speaking. Again, haven't reloaded yet. With Chapter 4 coming up, with future Spec Ops, I don't expect him to be a forbidden character very often. He is going to be a very good character to use when pushing content forward. When you're fighting stuff that is your level and higher, that's where this guy steps in and really begins to make it worth it to have him along. So I don't quite have him built all the way up there, but I'm working on it. The next round of AP, that's all his. I've just spent the last needed to get AOU Black Widow up to 4 star. So the next bit of AP, I can stick it here and start working to get him up to 3. That's really about all that he still needs. Now, I hear a lot of thunderstorms in the background going on, and I want to get up to the front. That PvP season, as we can see, it's now ended. Congratulations to everybody with Agent 13. I'm going to call it here. We're going to wait and see until I get that next video out. Let me be straight up with this one. The next video will probably not be Marvel Now Hawkeye. It will probably be the new PvP character from, again, that pure theory crafting point of view. We'll take a look at that character. We'll look at their abilities. We won't be able to see their EISOs, but we'll be able to see their stats at level 1 to get an idea of comparisons. And we'll be able to see their passives, their resources, and their abilities and buffs and debuffs. Let's start putting them together. I'm excited for it. It'll be a surprise for me. So I'm going to go do that. You guys go do what you like. This is Hoagland. I'm out.